Welcome back to Worlds Without Warning, the official podcast of Cetera magazine. I'm Jon Negroni, chief editor of Cetera, and a quick note on this week. We actually just released our second digital poetry issue. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's over at ceteramagazine.com, and it's of course based on the name of the best-selling book. So this week's podcast episode goes back to a recent story that we haven't had a chance to produce in audio yet. That changes today. It was originally published on April 2nd, 2026, and it's definitely one we have been wanting to bring to you ever since. Today's story is called Notch, the Lost Years by Patricia Caspers. It's a piece of magical realism fiction. It's part coming of age, part body horror, part love story, and it's about a woman named Alicia who has carried a secret her entire life. This is a story about queerness told through the language of the body, quite literally and fittingly considering our poetry collection timing with this story. It's about the years spent hiding, performing, drinking yourself numb before intimacy so that nobody gets close enough to see the truth. It's also about what happens when you finally meet someone who makes the hiding feel worse than the discovery. Content note, this story deals with themes of sexuality, body image, queerness, and alcohol use. And as always, you can find the written version of this story along with many others over at ceteramagazine.com, where you can also tip our authors with one-time donations to say thanks or to buy them a coffee. Plus, you can become a paid member of Cetera Magazine. Paid members get exclusive perks like bonus stories, the ability to comment, and more. Plus, you'd be helping us keep the bills paid. And now, here is Notch, the Lost Years. Notch, the Lost Years. Written by Patricia Caspers. Edited by Natalia Emmons and Jon Negroni. Read aloud by Jon Negroni. Mary Oliver said to let the soft animal of my body love what it loves. But my animal was not soft. She was carapace and scute, phalange and scale, kelp-scented. You know how Gregor woke up, pow, discovered he was a cockroach? It didn't happen that way for me, no big reveal. No sudden terror or awkward coming into myself as two beings. I have no memory of a time before knowing her name, or the feel of her smooth oval head, patterned like brown field tiles, but I don't know how we began. The morning of my first date, high school homecoming, my mother took me bra shopping for a complicated jobby that lifted my barely visible chi-chis and concealed my nips but left the pale skin of my back exposed. It was a near impossible mission in the tiny rural town where I grew up, but we left the task to the last minute, so there was no chance of city shopping. In her relief at finding the right tool for the dress at one of the two small department stores, crowded with egged pantyhose and flannel pajama sets, my mother, who did not ever speak of such things, turned the music low in the Pontiac on the ride home. She rolled the window an inch to release cigarette smoke into the wind and told me a story. I was a year old, she said, my toddler face covered in an angry, teething rash. She set me to soak in a warm oat milk bath, put my favorite 45, Everybody Wash, on the record player and lowered herself beside me on the toilet seat as the room sweated with the steam of bathwater. Soon enough, she said, I was rubbing myself gleefully down there. You had no shame whatsoever, Alicia, she said, and smacked the steering wheel with her cigarette hand, her cheeks blushing the pink of my homecoming dress. Naughty, she said. You chanted the word over and over. Naughty, naughty, naughty. It was your first word. My mother plucked me out of the tub, apparently, whisked a diaper over my baby parts, and dashed me into the hushed white and antiseptic office of our family doctor, who told her that Notchie, not naughty, I couldn't tell my mother, would likely shrivel and fall off over time. We could also opt for a fairly painless outpatient surgery, though my parents would have to pay out of pocket and in advance. Mother opted to wait. She was nothing if not frugal. Is it gone? She asked tentatively as we turned toward home that homecoming morning, and the tires flung the driveway's gravel in all directions. I pretended to laugh. I have no memory of that, I said, shaking my head, which my mother understood to mean, yes, Notchie's gone, and we said no more about it. Was this my first lie? Certainly there had been lies before, certainly there were lies after. In college, my roommate mentioned that a guy she was seeing never managed to find, or did not know to seek, the little man in her boat. And that's when I knew for certain I was different. Did others have a canoe inside themselves? Were their seas navigated by a tiny man in a woolly cap while my sea was navigated by a turtle named Notch? If given the choice, I would always trust the turtle, but that didn't matter. I wasn't given the choice. Notchie's always called me girlfriend, even during the years I pretended not to like girls in that way, and worried the word would give me away. Not that anyone could hear. Girlfriend, while I galloped my rocking horse through imagined meadows. Girlfriend, when Sean Cassidy appeared on TV. Girlfriend, when my friend Crystal asked to play house for reals. Girlfriend, she'd moan while I straddled tree limbs during after-dark games of hide-and-seek. Girlfriend, that homecoming night when my date, Bobby, pressed my bare back against the metal door of his Ford pickup. Girlfriend, while inside the cab I spread my legs across the bench seat and my head banged against the door handle. Girlfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend. Though I have no memory of the bathtub incident, the feeling that I'd done something wrong, that I was in trouble, stalked me. I never mentioned Notchie again to anyone, not even my husband. I was so nervous about a lover discovering Notchie that I made it a practice to drink myself at least tipsy before sex, and I never, ever let anyone put their head between my thighs. If I suspected someone glimpsed Notchie, lover or friend, I ghosted. Until I met Mel. I was working at Downtown Cafe while attending graduate school. I'd been divorced almost 2 years and hadn't been on a single date, no interest and no time. Notchie wasn't happy, but I ignored her whispers and focused on my studies. Mel was co-owner of the clothing shop across the street. Hearsay, fine and vintage goods. I knew this because Mel's business partner, a chatty white guy everyone called Burger who drank his coffee black no sugar, told me. "I don't know how they can drink that shit," he said every time I picked up Mel's cinnamon oat milk latte. "Tastes like ass." "Trying to frighten away our customers again, Burger?" I'd respond, and he'd laugh and drop $1 into the tip jar on his way out. And then one day, Mel picked up their own latte. I noticed them while they waited in line. They had light brown skin, soft brown eyes, and wavy black hair pulled into a low ponytail. Notchie noticed too. A customer started shouting at me across the bar. "This pastry is inedible," she cried, shoving her plate of half-eaten scone at me. "It's supposed to be blueberry. It tastes like onion. If I wanted onion, I'd have ordered onion." She didn't want another scone, and she didn't have time to wait. "Is this what they call slow food?" she scoffed as I placed a wrinkled $5 bill in her turned-up palm. 20-minute wait. Tastes like crap?" She turned to Mel. "How long have you been waiting?" Mel looked up from their phone. "I don't mind waiting," they said, smiling brightly as the woman rolled her eyes and stomped out. "I like the vibe here," Mel called to the woman's back. "I like it better when no one's shouting at the staff," they said quietly to me as they approached the register. "Thanks for that," I said, grinning. "Don't let the bastards grind you down, eh?" they said. "Never," I said, shaking my head, wondering about their age. Definitely younger than me, I thought. Much younger. Too young? Notchie said no. "Shush," I said aloud. "Pardon?" Mel said. "Oh, I stammered, feeling the heat crawl up my neck. "I was talking to myself. What can I get you?" When they ordered the cinnamon oat milk latte, I guessed who they were. "I'm a critter of many habits," they said, smiling again. "Usually Burger offers to buy the coffee while I do the bank deposit because he hates math, but he's out today, so it's all on me." They tilted their head and squinted a little. "You should come by after your shift. We just got in a blue tunic that would look amazing on you." "I didn't think you'd carry my size," I said with a, oh God, was it a nervous titter? "Pfft," they said, pushing backward to the door. "You'll be closed by then," I said with a small question in my voice. "For you," they said, "I'd stay open late." and the door jingled as they dashed across the street. I watched them unlocking their shop.
"If you're finished with your meat cute, can I get an onion bagel?"
the guy at the front of the line said with a kind smile. Mel was right about the tunic. It was cerulean with a drapey boat neck, 3/4 sleeves, and a very reasonable price tag. I bought it on the spot. To be honest, I would have bought the thing if I'd looked like a toad in it and had to eat rice for a month to recoup the expense. After I paid, we chatted while they closed up shop. "Have you always wanted to own a retail store?" I called across the clothing racks. "No," they laughed dryly and tossed a feather duster at me. "I was a social worker right out of grad school, but I burned out after 5 years, just lost my compass." "I've heard that's tough," I said, taking their hint and dusting shelves filled with vintage tin canisters and gently clinking mint green depression glass roosters. "There were bright moments, but I don't have enough of a buffer for so much sadness and so few resources," they said, while refolding graphic t-shirts on a display table. "So you made a change?" "I changed cubicles and stayed another 6 years," they said with a snort. "Oh," I said, doing the math of their age in my head. "That's a long burnout." They grabbed the vacuum from the closet and plugged it in. "I was on the cusp of a breakdown, I think," they called over the hum of the machine. "I had a couple of beers at my brother's house one night and got a little, emotional about everything. A burger was there. He'd been bartending for years and said it had lost its charm." "And that's when Hearsay was conceived?" "That's the short version," they said, stuffing the vacuum back into the closet. "Thanks for dusting." I handed them the feather duster. We stood close together. I was sure I felt something sparking between us. "Hey, so I like you," I blurted, hoping the low lighting hid my sudden pink. "Would you want to go out sometime?" "Hey, so I like you too," they said, grabbing their jacket from the closet hook. "But I don't really do relationships. The romantic sort, I mean." "Oh, yeah," I said, turning away and quickly scooping my backpack and shopping bag from behind the register. I was bright red now. I could feel it. "No problem. I'll see you at the coffee shop or, wherever." "Alicia, wait," Mel called as I backed toward the door. "The alarm." And then it wailed. Sorry, I shouted. "I'm an idiot." I let the door shut behind me. I ducked my head and hustled away from the blare of the alarm toward the underpass, toward home. Notch was silent. Or Notch was silent until I drank a half bottle of cheap Malbec and climbed under the covers. Girlfriend, she throned. A few days later, Mel stopped into the cafe during the lunch rush and stood at the bar. I tried not to make eye contact as I rang up orders and handed them behind me. "Do you want to see the urchins with me tonight?" they called over the Brazilian jazz vibrating the cafe's tiny speakers. "My brother canceled." I looked up, pointed at my chest and mouthed, "Me?" Mel nodded. "Rob, Roy, Rhett, anyone who can read my handwriting?" I called as I slid a cappuccino toward the wall of customers. "Tonight?" I asked Mel as I turned back to the toaster to smear a waiting sesame bagel. "Yes," they said. "I really don't want to go alone." "As friends?" I asked with my back to them. I could see my coworkers side-eyeing our conversation. "Friends," Mel shouted. That's how our friendship began. Mel didn't lie. They didn't do romantic relationships, not with me, not with anyone. For a long time, it was fine. After the urchins, Mel invited me to a showing of The Thin Man at an independent theater across town, and we shared a pint of contraband Rocky Road. I would have gone just to hear Mel's laugh, boisterous, as if there were no one else in the room. Soon we were spending Friday evenings hanging out on my apartment patio listening to French jazz while Mel smoked cloves, and I tried not to look too long at their lips. We swapped notes, books, and tales of retail tragedies. We painted posters and chanted at protests. We took an early train to the country to buy a slice of the world's largest donut. Glazed, greasy, disappointing. But all the while, we shared stories about our parents, our siblings, our first loves. I never mentioned Notch, though I could feel her presence like an itch, like an ache. A year later, Mel and I stood waist deep in the Pacific. I'd finished grad school, and my parents saved enough to gift me a trip to the beach. I invited Mel, of course. We were practically living together by then. The sky was blue on blue. The water was just cool enough to be a fresh welcome. The air smelled of sunscreen, and down the shoreline, seagulls chased each other and screeched in circles around someone's abandoned, tattered fast food bags. Mel watched the horizon. When I was a kid, I said, we had a pomegranate tree in our backyard. It was mostly neglected, but every summer it would grow small green fruit, round with pointy star stems, each one like a fat alien octopus. A fat alien octopus? Mel asked, quirking an eyebrow. It's my fruit story. Okay, alien octopus, go on. They had leaned backwards quickly to dunk their hair, and the dark curls dripped water down their back. Every day I'd check how they were ripening. Yellow, then pink, then rosier pink, roundness flattening on each side. Every day I wanted to pluck one, but I wanted it to be the most ripe, the sweetest. And every year I waited too long. I'd wake up one morning and the deer would have eaten the entire bush, leaves and all. I'd cry all the way to school. I thought you said it was a tree, Mel asked. It was a bushy tree, I said. That's not the point. Mel snorted, and then we were silent for a minute, splashing. I could feel Notchie, restless. I was thankful for the cloak of the sea. May I ask a question? Mel asked. Another question? I laughed. Yes. Notch was behaving oddly. I could feel her in my belly, in my chest. My back ached and I wanted to hold my breath. Am I the pomegranate in this parable of produce? Do you ever feel like you're so different that no one could possibly understand? I asked, feeling the waves pull my legs from under me. Like no one would ever believe the truth of you? Yes, every day, Mel sighed. Alicia, I can't be what you want. What do I want? I was paddling my arms now as I sank lower, and seawater sloshed in my face while easing the pain in my back. In answer, Mel shook their head. We could be something, I said. And then I was under the waves. It was a relief, really, like a long stretch after hunkering down. My body, carapace and scute, phalange and scale, soft leather, but not a stranger. My body was most mine. I blinked several times, and through the shadowy sway, something lingered. A fish, dark and strong-jawed. I almost didn't have time to wonder before the fish, a remora, darted in and pressed its body to my turtle belly, held fast. Oh, delight. Oh, how I swam at last. That was Notch, The Lost Years by Patricia Caspers. Editor's notes. This story operates by a logic the reader doesn't understand until they're already inside it. The story announces its metaphysical premise, a woman who has always known herself as partly turtle, partly human, whose clitoris has its own name and personality and history, with about the same flatness you'd use to describe a story about two people talking over dinner. This is the move. By the time you realize you're reading magical realism, you've accepted it as yet another quirky biography. What the author understands, or what many writers get wrong, is that the body in fiction almost always becomes allegory. The body stands for something. The queer body, the marginalized body, the body that society has tried to surgically correct out of existence. And yes, Notchie's near excision by a family doctor is not incidental. It's a real gut punch because these bodies usually get conscripted into argument. This story cuts that. Notchie is decisively not a symbol for queerness. Notchie is queerness, the same way Notchie is pleasure, selfhood, the part of you that whispers girlfriend, whether you're ready to hear it or not. The structure is what truly earns the ending. We move from childhood shame to suppression to a friendship that is and isn't enough, and the reader feels the pent-up pressure of a self that has been managed rather than lived. When the narrator finally goes under the wave, the release is physical before it's emotional, before it's metaphorical, and that's exactly the right order. And what a great voice this story wields with such effortless confidence. It's funny in the way people are funny when they've processed enormous pain, which is to say it's efficient without performance, a kind of wild precision. We published this because it reminded us what fiction can explain a life by moving as one. It can be startling, inevitable, strange, and, in the end, entirely yours. Patricia Caspers is the founding editor-in-chief of West Trestle Review. She is the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, most recently, The Most Kissed Woman in the World. She earned an MFA in creative writing from Mills College, rest in peace, and her award-winning work has appeared widely in journals such as Ploughshares, Pithead Chapel, and Cimarron. She is a Unitarian Universalist. You can find Notch the Lost Years over at ceteramagazine.com, where you can also check out our new poetry issue, The Body Keeps the Score. Subscribe for free to get new stories every Thursday, or become a paid member to receive bonus stories and directly support the magazine. Also, we're always looking for submissions from new contributors, so if you're a writer interested in submitting to Cetera, definitely check out our submission guidelines at ceteramagazine.com. And thanks as always for listening to Worlds Without Warning. Until next time, let the animal of your body love what it loves, even if it's not soft, even if it's scale and scute, especially then. Take care of yourselves.